Hello and welcome back to Mads World. I'm your host Mads and I hope you've been enjoying the show so far. If you have, please remember to subscribe, rate or review the podcast on Apple or Spotify, whatever your chosen platform is. It means so much to me and I'd love to hear your feedback as well. So please do Instagram DM me, Twitter message me, TikTok message me, whatever. I'm basically everywhere these days, but I do love to hear from you. So yeah, get in touch. This week I'm joined by journalist and poet from London, Chloe Laws. Chloe is the founder of F Girls Club, a platform fighting misogyny, which I bloody love. She has written for the likes of Glamour, Vogue, Cosmo, Dazed, The Metro, and many more titles, which is really exciting, and she's so well informed on so many awesome subjects. So in this episode, we chat about how she started the feminist platform, how she faces criticism and trolls online, social media's influence on modern feminism, female friendships and the patriarchy, and much more. Hello, Chloe.
Hi, Maddie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. You are the perfect guest for Mads World because everything that you talk about in your amazing online platform, are we calling it F Girls? I don't ever know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, F Girls Club, but everyone says it differently. A lot of people go like for girls or for girls or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to say it, but yeah, I say F Girls Club.
Amazing. It's such a brilliant platform and I'm really excited to chat about it in a minute. But up first, I have a few questions to ask you for our speed date question round just so our listeners can learn a little bit more about you. So my first question is, what are you most passionate about?
Oh, that's really tricky. I've got a few. I think my main passion is just trying to do a bit of good and like just leave stuff a little bit nicer than I started. And then on the flip side, very passionate about food, very passionate about animals, and yeah, passionate about Taylor Swift. I would say those are kind of the keynote passions.
And favourite animal? When you're passionate about animals, what kind of animals are we talking?
I love sharks.
What?
Yeah, love orca whales, and then cats and dogs as well. And I've been vegetarian since I was like 3, so I'm a big animal lover.
You'll hate to know then the main fish that we eat in Australia is flake, which is sharks.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like I don't really get when people have tiers of meat that they will and won't eat. I'm kind of like, if you're going to eat meat, you can't really be that moral about what kind you eat, I feel like. So I actually don't have many feelings about that.
Fair enough. And what is something that you wish more people understood about you?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think I wish people understood more that, I don't know, I get a lot of people often say to me like, oh, you do so much, like how do you do it? And I always think like, I suffer from burnout regularly. I have anxiety. I really have to prioritize my mental health and looking after myself. So I think that's probably something I wish people knew more about me, that this perception of busyness and ambition, like yes, that is part of my life, but a bigger part is managing that and being vulnerable with myself and other people and making sure that I'm looking after myself and not just always being on. I think people sometimes expect that and that's not, no one can do that.
Yeah, and I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but running a platform like yours, I'm sure you get loads of women reaching out and people reaching out with their own stories and their own traumas and stuff, and that can be quite taxing on your mental health as well, sort of having an influx of just people's pain coming at you all the time.
I've had to be a lot more boundaried with it. I think especially with some of my poetry, like poetry is such a vulnerable medium and creativity, and I think that gives people the impression that they have like free access to you, and even if it's always coming from like the loveliest place, I think there's only so much that one person can do. I'm not a trained therapist, I can't answer those kind of questions regularly, but even though it's really nice that people feel comfortable coming to me for that, I think there's that's the blurred line with social media and feminism and this this mass vulnerability.
No, that's so true. And it's definitely something you have to learn. I feel like in the beginning, whenever you start these things, you kind of want to help everyone and you start off just, trying to offer this advice, which people are asking for. But if you're not trained in it, it's not safe for your own psyche,
Yeah.
And my next question is, this one's a bit more fun. What is your favorite pop culture trend or moment of the year so far?
Okay, so we're quite early into 2023. I
Yeah.
always just think about things that have happened this week. I feel like the
Yeah.
zeitgeist changes so quickly that it's really hard to remember anything that happened more than like 3 days ago. Like this week, I'm very into like that bold glamour filter and all the
Oh,
conversations
yes.
around that. I've just done a big feature on it, so that was good to like get that out of my system.
Yep.
And then I guess on a more fun, I don't know, the Hailey Bieber Selena drama at the moment.
Can you explain this to me? Because I've seen this just in a nutshell, sum
Yeah,
it up, because I do not know what's going on and I'm trying to figure it out and I need an explainer.
it's pretty hard to understand, but I think basically it was people think that Hailey Bieber and Kylie Jenner were making fun of Selena for having laminated eyebrows, or something, and they were kind of mocking her. And then Selena came off TikTok because there was just an influx of comments and stuff, and it's always just all about her and Hailey. And then since then they've I think just TikTok has been absolutely wild with all these fan theories and like kind of Team Selena, Team Hailey. And then Jordan Woods and Pia Mia keep using Rare Beauty products at the moment. So like using the lip liner. So everyone's saying obviously that's them on Team Selena. But it's just I think for me like peak ridiculous internet culture. Um,
Yeah.
I would hate to be on the receiving, I'd hate to be Hailey or Selena in it. That them being pitted against each other isn't great, but I think also some people are trying to make it this real like feminist argument, and I kind of don't think it's that deep. I feel like they aren't really weighing in on it. It's just some good old fashioned like internet drama. I feel like sometimes we miss that a little bit. Like that's why I love Florence Pugh. I feel like she's really bringing back early 2000s like ridiculous celebrity and like just having
Yeah.
fun with it. And I think celebrity is ridiculous, and we just should have fun with it. So yeah, I think those are the two things on my mind this week. But in terms of like my favorite pop culture moment, honestly, that just anything Paul Mescal at the moment.
Obsessed.
I was at an award show and he was far away. I was obviously with all the normies and was not allowed to interact with him, but from afar, I just love him. And I thought After Sun was like the best film I've seen in a long time. So just anything he does is probably my fave pop culture moment of 2023.
Do you know how many people that I ask favorite pop culture moment or like celebrity crush, anything? He's come up so much. And I think it is because of like since, I don't know, in the last 6 months, he's just gone, he's back in his normal people era and everyone loves it.
Yeah, and I'm always like, please don't disappoint me. Him and Andrew Garfield,
Yeah.
and there's a couple of others, but like out of those like celebrity men, I'm just like, please just never do anything that I have to withdraw my support for you because I
Honestly,
think you're great.
it's a dangerous game.
It really is.
And my final question for this round is, what is your funniest date story?
This is so tricky because I have a lot of like dating anecdotes that I don't actually think are that funny with like hindsight and age. At the time when you're in your early 20s, you're like, oh, this guy, like he was like said this or he was really weird with this, and then you think that's funny.
Mm.
But I feel like me and my partner, we met in lockdown, so we had a lot of park dates. And on our first one, I really needed to wee, so we both had to take turns in going in a bush. That was a nice start to like romance, I think. It was such a weird era looking back, and like as if we like were like shivering walking around a park in mid-December, like
Insane.
walking apart from each other and then going into the bushes in turns to wee. But yeah, I think that's probably up there.
I was actually reflecting on this morning. I was thinking, like, do you think that we will be telling like our future generations about it and how weird? Like, it'll be so hard to explain how strange it all was because I had a few park dates as well, and you're just like having coffee and hanging out with a stranger, and you're sort of like really confronted with what a date is, and it's just you and a stranger getting to know each other on the most basic level, and it's just so weird.
Yeah, it's so intense. And I think for me, it worked out, better than I could have imagined. And I think I ended up having like an emotional connection with someone before physical. And, we've now been together almost like 3 years or whatever. But I think it's, yeah, on reflection, I don't know how you put it into words. And I think people are really struggling with that. And I think collectively, like we're trying to do it almost too soon. Like we're not really even out of it. Like COVID is still around, and I feel like sometimes all these documentaries and films on that time period, it's too soon. Like we all need to process what
Mm-hmm.
happened, and then I think we will in a couple of generations be talking about it like this old timey thing that we all went through, and
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, you'll never understand. But yeah, for
Yeah.
now it's really hard to name and process.
That's so true. Well, thank you so much for answering all of those questions. I'm hoping now we can have a chat about F Girls Club and how it all began, because you've got an amazing online presence with F Girls Club. And as you were telling me before, you're now doing poetry and you're a journalist, and it's just, you've absolutely exploded and it's just awesome to see. So, can you tell me a little bit how the platform began?
Yeah, of course. So F Girls I started in 2017, I believe. I was trying to count back recently. So yeah, a long while ago now. I was at my kitchen table and in my flat share at the time in East London, and I'd been mulling it over for a long time. I knew that I was frustrated. Currently, I was working in fashion and fashion journalism, and I was frustrated with that and kind of figuring out that that maybe wasn't exactly the route of journalism I wanted to do, and just feeling like in mainstream media you have to be apolitical at most of the glossies, you have to water down your feminism really regularly, and I just wanted somewhere where I could put the content that I wanted to consume, and I wasn't seeing it as much there. I think 2017 was a long while ago in terms of internet culture and feminism, and there weren't really many other platforms like F Girls Club. I think at the time I remember not feeling like there was one. Now there are a lot more, and that's brilliant. Like it's, you know, such a good community that I have with other spaces that are similar. But yeah, then I just wanted to do something on my own and be able to, you know, put content and words to feelings and conversations that I was having with a lot of friends that you just didn't really see reflected in media. So yeah, I think in kind of classic me fashion, if I get an idea in my head or if I want to do something, I just like really burrow down. So I think I built the website, taught myself how to code, set up all the socials, did that in an afternoon, and then launched it. And it started more as a website and somewhere where I would commission and write features. The more that's become my full-time job over the last, you know, 6-7 years, the less its focus is that, and the more that it's on social activism and events.
That's amazing. And it's come so far since then. And just thinking like you learning to code on a random afternoon and to what it is now. So it's really, really awesome to see. What do you think is the best thing about having founded such an awesome platform?
Definitely the community. I feel like it's such a nice space, and because it grew quite slowly actually in terms of um, I guess I started it without having a real goal. I didn't want it to, you know, I didn't go in thinking I want this to be a business or have X amount of followers or be this. I just wanted it to be somewhere where I could have like authentic conversations around intersectional feminism, patriarchy, etc. And I think through that, because it's had this slow growth, the community are very reflective of the messages we're talking about, and it's not these kind of like influx of going viral and having maybe people that don't necessarily believe in all of your pillars and key values. So I think, yeah, the community, it's a really lovely, supportive, open-minded, liberal community, and they're so engaged. Whenever we do any events, they show up in their masses, and just in terms of standing up for us as well. Like I really don't have to do any community engagement. If someone's being like a bit of a dick to me on something,
People will go for them.
yeah, and they just, you know, and they're so eloquent and educated
Mm,
in these topics, and I just think
yeah.
it's, you know, I really don't have to do much of that. So that's one of my favorite things of the F Girls Club.
And in talking about your community, what do you think are the most polarizing subjects that you discuss on the platform? So obviously you were saying that people have really nuanced opinions and, you know, you don't have to believe in every single cause that the platform discusses with also believing in some. So what do you think are the most polarizing subjects?
I think it's polarizing is so hard because I think I don't view a lot of them as polarizing. It's the feminism and politics I subscribe to, but certain like topics do always get a lot of hate. So when I talk about abortion and abortion rights, there's always a load of pro-lifers. I think the main polarizing doesn't feel like the right word for this, but in terms of talking about transphobia and our trans solidarity, there's a certain demographic that gets so angry about that every time. And transphobia is currently being used by the British media in, you know, it's being used to attract column inches, views, attention, and it's really lazy, and it's scapegoating on a mass scale, um, And I think transphobes love being transphobic. You can see it in their faces, their tweets, their articles, and they love to engage on F-Girls with that stuff. And I just don't have any time for it. I won't entertain it on the platform. And, you know, people might, I think the argument is always free speech. And it's like, well, no, that's hate speech and that's bigotry. And that's not what we're about. So it's a tricky one. I think in terms of polarizing topics, there's a line for me. And the feminism in politics I believe in doesn't have any time for hate speech, and that kind of, a lot of that will encapsulate the trolling or the different opinions we get. So like, you know, pro-life, transphobia, racism, etc. Those aren't, they don't have any place in F Girls Club. So it's really, I think, because the topics we talk about are so big, and they're so meaty, I think it is a little bit of a, it's weirdly a little bit black and white, even though the conversations we're having are very grey and nuanced. You either are on that side of society and history, or you're on the opposite one. And I think there is such a divide right now.
Yeah. And how do you deal with that trolling and those hateful comments? Like, I guess, you know, mentally for you, it must be pretty tough. And you said you've got your followers and your engaged audience that sort of backs you when those things happen. But how do you sort of stay strong in those situations?
Yeah, I've run social accounts for some of the biggest magazines, Glamour, Stylist, and I run F Girls Club, and I feel like when it's a platform, I can separate myself from a bit more easily. I think when it's on my personal account, that's where I struggle a bit more. I generally feel if it's just debate and it's a difference of opinion, then that's fine. I think, as I said, if it's hate speech or bigotry, then block, delete, restrict, no time for it. I think I also just, if something goes really viral and I know that it's a topic where a lot of misogynists will have found me, or a lot of incels will have found me, which does happen, I will ask a friend or loved one to look through my like message requests and, you know, delete any of the really awful ones, but also just flag any that I wouldn't want to miss, or any, you know, someone messaging about something important. So I think not letting myself look at it all, you can go through a real rabbit hole with that. But yeah, luckily with F Girls, we actually, day to day, we don't get much. I think it's those certain topics that then you get flooded with pro-lifers, TERFs, incels, but they're not following our platform. They're just, you know, they're just doing it because that's what they do on the internet, and they try and find people to be angry at. So yeah, block and delete them. They're not welcome on F Girls.
Yeah. It's great that you have that supportive community as well. And I wanted to chat a little bit more about social media before we jump into some of the topics that you discuss most on F Girls. How do you think social media, and in particular TikTok and the rise of TikTok over COVID and to how big it is now, how do you think that has influenced modern feminism?
I think it's a hugely democratizing tool. So, you know, it's the biggest one we have in modern times. You can bring about law changes via social media and TikTok, spread education that isn't covered in schools, fight against beauty standards, you know, mobilize protests. I think there's so much good, and I think TikTok and social media's biggest influence on feminism is making it more accessible. I don't think it necessarily changes what feminism is, but it's an extension of people, and it is it's a real information spreader. I think on the flip side, for all the good it can bring about, it can do the opposite. You know, incel culture, anti-hate, and there's very little grey area online, and that can cause so much, you know, misunderstanding and sweeping generalizations, and that can be really damaging to, you know, certain feminist movements. And, you know, I feel like the kind of like dump him feminism, or that kind of feminism, you know, it has its place, but it is very reductive in a lot of ways. And, you know, probably some of the posts that on F Girls Club get misinterpreted because you have to use a pull quote, or you say something really snappy, or it has to be a 30-second video, and these conversations are so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
So I think its impact is really positive in terms of young girls being able to find this kind of information and education that they haven't had access to in previous generations, unless, you know, a woman in their life is teaching them about it, or they happen upon a book. I think it is much more present and mainstream, which is brilliant. On the flip side, so is mainstream misogyny, and also this lack of nuance. And I think it's moving those conversations beyond TikTok and social. Like, it's a great starting point, but you can't have them solely on social media and on the internet. Like, feminism is bigger than that. It's real life. Like, you know, it's a great way to follow some creators and activists that you can learn a lot from, learn the language to put to your feelings. But then it's about having those conversations in real life, or thinking about how it affects your real life. And you know, it's not a silo, it's not a vacuum. So I think it's really complex, and its influence on modern feminism is more about how it's packaged, rather than changing the issues or the core debates.
And I suppose, like you said, it's a tool, like an extension of the discussion rather than the whole discussion. So in terms of the conversation itself, how do you think in the last few years, and I know that you mentioned beauty filters before, which is obviously like trending at the moment and it's just become a huge conversation, but how do you think the discussion has changed around female beauty and the male gaze? And this encompasses things like body hair as well, because obviously that conversation is just amped up so much, and the empowerment that women are feeling to take control back is amazing. What would you say in regards to that?
I think it's brilliant that these conversations are happening somewhere that is so accessible. So, you know, young girls can learn that they can have body hair, or their skin can look a certain way. Again, I think on the flip side, beauty standards have become so intensified with social media, and they've become more and more ridiculous. You know, like these filters and these, you know, editing tools, and the, you know, the tiny waist and the perfect skin and the perfect hair at all times, and these really curated like aesthetics, clean girl aesthetic. You know, what vanilla girl one is one I saw the other day. I think
the buccal fat thing, the whole buccal fat removal thing. I mean, that's another thing where it transcends into real life beyond social media.
Yeah, and it's really hard to decide or feel if it's wholly positive or negative. Like, I feel like its influence is probably neutral, and it's, again, more this extension of people. And I think there is this very like trite brand of beauty inclusivity that is very popular on TikTok and Instagram right now. And well, it was popular on Instagram about 3 years ago, but it's kind of coming to TikTok, and it's, you know, women who hit basically every westernized Eurocentric beauty ideal, and they're like contorting themselves into certain poses, and it's being packaged as this like act of bravery, you know, like squishing their rolls together, zooming in on like a single spot. And that isn't radical, that's co-opting, and that's co-opting movements that were started by fat black women in body positivity.
So it's not intersectional feminism.
And that's being, I think those accounts are usually the ones that have the most followers, they're the ones that make the most money. And I think there's a lot of brilliant people with platforms that, you know, we need to see more of, and they're the voices I would love to hear more of on social media. And it's a really hard, I think it has changed the discussion over the male gaze and body image, and I think it's much more prevalent, but it's also giving us a lot more insecurities, and it's very layered, and for every good maybe there's bad. And it's just, you know, it's such a messy, complicated time to be alive and to be a young woman. And I honestly always think about, I'm really glad I'm not a teenager right now. Like, I think it probably is harder. And you know, there's this usual, you know, that stereotype of boomers or millennials being like, oh, it was so much harder in my day. Like, I disagree. I don't think it was. I think there's so much more to navigate now with the pressures of online as well as that we had in real life. And, you know, I hope that places like F Girls Club and other accounts can offer some solace and some, like, you know, a bit of refreshment in those spaces. Because, you know, I've had wake up calls over the last few years of being like, what I believe, you know, you're in this bubble where everyone around you and everyone you follow believes that too, because of why would you engage with misogynists or people that are so far from what you believe in? But then you become very, you know, it's a bubble, and you forget how bad some of the rest of the internet is. And maybe, like, you know, I don't know what your average person's For You page looks like. So yeah, it's tricky.
I guess as well, then, if we're not having those discussions with people, it's hard to actually influence and change people's minds. And then when people get to the polling booths, like that's how people like Trump can get in, and we're shocked because in our bubble, that sort of those discussions don't exist. And then you're sort of like, how is the average like, how has this happened? But then I guess it's sort of, if you block out those conversations, like you see someone being racist on social media, you can block, delete it, ignore it. But if you don't engage, but then it's also like you have to protect yourself, like, and it's especially not minority groups as a responsibility to engage with these people either. But then I guess the question is, how do we actually make a difference to these people?
Yeah, and that's the big question, isn't it? And I think that's what we're all trying to do. And I think it's my focus is younger people now. Like I'm doing a bit more work in schools and talks and stuff.
That's
and
awesome.
I think that's more where I want trying to focus my energy this year. I just keep thinking, how do you bring about actual change? And social media is a brilliant tool for activists and for campaigners, and it it has done wonderful things, and but it's just a tool and it's an extension of something. And where can you bring those conversations where they aren't already happening? Like I love those conversations on F Girls, but the people that follow us are already subscribed to that. They already believe that. So where can you have those conversations elsewhere? It's why I love to write quite meaty feminist pieces for places like Glamour or other women's magazines that historically maybe weren't so feminist, or that they are now, but maybe some of their audience still you can still teach them something, you can try and challenge their mindset a little bit more. And it's around election time, like go canvassing, like that really, that's something you can proactively do. And it's trying to meld what we do online to our real life actions in a safe way, obviously. And I think as a white woman, like I have more safety and privilege, and I should I feel a responsibility to do as much as I can.
And I found it really interesting as well. You mentioned before about people who are in a more privileged position who are commodifying that body image and making it something that is you can sponsor, or something that, and it's sort of like taking the voice or taking the platform away from the fat black women that started this movement. How do you think that influencers or creators like that can be intersectional feminists but still help people to feel more confident and help people to feel more comfortable in their own skin?
Yeah, I think there are some that are doing it really well. I think it's calling a spade a bit more. It's not co-opting a movement. It's saying, it's owning that they're mid-size, and it's owning that they aren't plus size, or they are a certain beauty ideal, and that doesn't mean that they aren't allowed to have insecurities or they can't give confidence to other women. That's amazing. Like there's room for everyone. I really do believe that. But it's not taking from someone else. It's not taking from a movement or a campaign that you didn't that you're not helping. It's shedding light on content creators that are potentially share other people's content, and just calling it what it is. I think the hashtag body positivity movement has just been changed so much, it's barely recognizable. And it's just, I think, having a little bit of self-awareness over what you're doing, what you stand for. And that doesn't mean that you're doing, and it doesn't mean the content is wrong. It's how you're packaging it and how you're making money off of it in particular spaces.
And in a bit of a different thread, do you think that female friendships are difficult to navigate, or is it just something that the patriarchy tells us? Because like we were saying before with the whole Selena Gomez controversy at the moment, the media loves pitting women against each other. We're always hearing these conversations about how females are naturally competitive and it's difficult to have these friendships. But what would you say in regards to that?
It's such a big question, and I think female friendships and friendships between women are so beautiful, and they're so sacred, and they're really vital to our existence and happiness. And I think that is born from the patriarchy. Like we have this need to feel heard and feel safe and feel loved, and you don't get that this is talking very broadly and in kind of quotations from men when you're living in a patriarchy in the same way. And so women, we've had to prioritize our friendships, and it's becoming this I think female friendships are a armor in life, and they are so important, but then, you know, because of that we put so much weight on them, and they are really intense, and you know, that can make them hard to navigate, but they're not as hard to navigate as like mainstream media and teen high school films would have us believe, I think. But it's, yeah, we've internalized those tropes, I guess. And so it's unlearning that, like, you know, it's unlearning that women aren't bitchy. It's unlearning that like someone's going to stab you on the back, or that, you know, female friendships are hierarchical. But it's, yeah, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? I think it's, when, you know, I guess your question was like, is it hard to navigate, and is that something patriarchy tells us? Like, yes, but there is also kind of something that the patriarchy created. So how do we go around it? But, you know, I think my friendships with women are like, is the most important thing in my life, and I know most women in my life would say the same thing. And that's so amazing. And I think it's focusing on, you know, owning that and prioritizing our friendships over, you know, romance, or at least putting it on a level playing field with romance and with career. And that will help us to kind of re-educate people and challenge those like you know, misogynist ideas that women's friendships are surface and bitchy and you know, hard to navigate.
And I loved what you said then as well about prioritizing or putting it on the same playing field, because there's so much focus on romantic love and sexual love and dating, when, you know, some of the best loves of our lives will be our female friendships, or, you know, platonic relationships that we have with people. So I think, yeah, that's such a beautiful way to put it, is like keeping it at the forefront. I'm someone who gets sucked into a relationship so easily, and I always try and be better, but it's just something that, you know, you can't just wait until you're out of a relationship and then expect all your friends to still be there when you've not been nurturing those friendships. So I think it's just something to keep in mind, like how valuable that is.
Definitely. And I think even that thing, you know, as you said, you know, if you're one of those people that jumps into relationships or really prioritizes them, it's also being easy on yourself with that, like, and being kind to yourself about that, because we've been told to do that. Like, it's, of course, that's what our natural instinct is, because we've only ever been told as young girls and socialized to prioritize that. And, you know, unlearning that is something that you have to do consciously, and it's not just going to happen, and it, you know, you will mess up and it will be hard. And I think it's great to, you know, I think we should all be prioritizing these friendships, but then if you can't, or you don't the first few times, or, you know, you make mistakes, and that's totally understandable.
I think being kind to yourself is such great advice, even though it's sometimes easier said than done. What would your best advice be to people feeling the effects of the patriarchy, and how would you know, I know we talked about where you draw strength from earlier, but what would your best advice be to anyone listening?
I think we all feel the effects of the patriarchy. But if it's something that you're conscious about and angry at, then try and channel it into action. You know, small actions like calling out your uncle for his casual sexism if you're in a safe space, writing to an MP or signing a petition. And then, you know, bigger actions, join a protest. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of performative activism, and people should do more than just, you know, retweet. But I think the focus and onus is always put on women, and actually, with the patriarchy affects men too. It affects everyone, and most men might not want to hear that or believe that yet, but the men who do, I think it's going beyond the bare minimum, and it's not just, you know, whispering to a girl in a bar that he's trying to like chat up that he's a feminist. It's actually turning that into action. You know, I would say to men, like, don't just repeat sound bites of what you've heard women say to appear like an ally. It's, you know, really try and understand what they're saying and then apply it to your own actions. And I think that would be my advice. I think everyone feels the effect of the patriarchy. Is the first step is to accept that, learn what that looks like, and then try and do something about it. And that can be small or big, and, you know, can be to everyone's comfort levels. But it's also not only on, you know, women and non-binary people to pursue that. You know, we can't do much without men in terms of changing the patriarchy.
Oh, well, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. This has been such an amazing chat, and yeah, I'm just so proud of how far F Girls has come and everything you're achieving. And what's next for the platform?
Thank you. What's next? Well, I've just gone freelance. So I quit my full-time job, and it was just last week. So I should have more time for everything. Is the goal. So yeah, I've got too many ideas and I need to pick one. So we will see. But yeah, definitely more events this year. I think now the world's opened back up. I want to get back into doing those.
That sounds so fun. I'll definitely be at some of those. So yes, thank you very much for joining. I hope you enjoyed my chat with the wonderful Chloe. Please let me know on my socials if you have any stories or thoughts of your own to share for the podcast. Love and elbow taps. Peace.